original humans. And one of the things I like to do in introducing this one, because there's always a common question, how does the Bible interact with science? And so I talk about Genesis chapter 1, which is the first book of the Bible, right? And chapter 1, verse 2 says, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. And I said, well, there's your science. So you have spirituality, God, and water. Water is a molecule, right? Made up of atoms of hydrogen and oxygen joined together by a polar covalent bond, right? And so we can get into the water chemistry there. And so the fact that there were atoms and molecules present doesn't negate that there could have been particles that was an explosion and they begin to drift apart, which we call the Big Bang Theory. And God is also there at the same time. So do they have to be opposing ideas and thoughts? Or can we combine the two and get a better holistic picture, okay, of what's going on? The last I'll mention in that, and then what I like to do is, in time, open the floor and see what's on your mind and let you ask me some questions about the things that I just said or something else that you might be thinking of. So the last was that I like to introduce is, I think we know the story of Adam and Eve. Eve ate the apple and Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. But what's a detail some of us don't know is that before they were kicked out of the garden, the scripture says God made clothes for them of animal skin and sent them out into the sent them out of the garden. So, which is a sneak peek. I'm working on my third book, the last in this trilogy. So this is the Interface Between Science and Scripture series. So the last one is gender, sex, and sexuality. Right? So if we're talking about that, but we begin to talk about gender and clothing. So it's like, well, why did God feel the need to make clothes? Were people wearing clothes? And so in this book, I talk about Adam and Eve might not have been the only people on the earth. And so we have scientific data that supports that. So we have other hominids, as we would call them, human species that existed. And one of those earlier species were the first to start wearing clothes. And all the other species that followed carried on being able to cook and use fire and wear clothes and use tools made of stone. And when it got to us, called modern humans, we still carried on those things. So the fact that early humans already were wearing clothes, when God put them out of the garden, he made them clothing so that they could fit in with the rest of the people. This book goes on to talk about how Adam and Eve's son Cain went on and found his wife later in a faraway country. It's like, well, I used to ask my mom, well, where did she come from, Mom? Okay, so it's kind of eased into the storyline there. So we began to look at that. And I talk a lot also because all my life I asked a lot of questions, particularly when it comes to the Bible and spirituality, and many of you do too, and many of the friends that I have, and many people kind of stop going to church because it's like, well, all the pieces don't fit together. And so one of the things that we do in science and spirituality, there are some groups of scientists who use their research and studies to say that believing in God is not plausible, and then there's the other camp that says they use their research to show that believing in God is plausible. I don't try to convince people one way or the other to believe science or to believe God. I just tell what I do. I combine the two. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive events. And so if we put them together, it makes more sense of the timeline for me. Okay? So that's what I do in science and spirituality. I use that to solve everyday problems, like controlling my mind, what I thought, so I don't go off on people, that I can be a leader and confront those other professors. I serve as chair of the biology department, biology pre-grad department at Dillard University in New Orleans. And so when a professor's not getting to class on time or a student is always complaining about something, I don't go to altercation, right? Because I can control my thoughts, and remember, we can control the things that we think about and what we do. And so science and spirituality is a tool for living everyday life, but also understanding and gaining better understanding for yourself as an individual rather than relying on what kind of organized religions might say that we have to believe and what rules we have to follow. So in today's society, as our culture is changing and we're changing, we have more knowledge, we have more understanding. Historically, we started adding cultural studies and history to biblical scriptures to be able to understanding. By adding science to scripture, I believe we're going to get even a greater understanding, more unity among ourselves, greater thinking power, and greater acceptance of one another. So I want to open up